Let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father in heaven, may the faith you have given us in your Son, Jesus Christ, our brother, and the flame of charity enkindled in our hearts by the Holy Spirit reawaken in us the blessed hope for the coming of your kingdom. May your grace transform us into tireless cultivators of the seeds of the gospel. May those seeds transform from within both humanity and the whole cosmos, in the sure expectation of a new heaven and a new earth, when, with the powers of evil vanquished, your glory will shine eternally. May the grace of the Jubilee reawaken in us pilgrims of hope, a yearning for the treasures of heaven. May that same grace spread the joy and peace of our Redeemer throughout the earth. To you, our God, eternally blessed, be glory and praise forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
So tonight we're talking about the structures and systems for youth ministry. One of the main things we have to understand is that form follows function. What do I mean by that? Simple. Whatever it is we want to get done must have a system or a structure to support what we want to get done. Sometimes what happens in what you call older organizations, and I don't think you could get any older than the church, is that you may have a form that no longer serves a function. And that is a very real reality for youth ministry, because 100 years ago, nobody was talking about youth ministry. That was not important. It was not a thing. However, as life changes, as the family changes, as society changes, the reason that we even have something called youth ministry is because functions are changing, and therefore forms have to change to be able to support it. And so youth ministry, the concept of youth ministry, is born out of the changes, the societal changes from the 1960s onward. And what we saw in youth ministry is that there have been really 3 iterations of what we understand as youth ministry. And so I have it there, and it's the period moving from the 1960s all the way to the 2020s. The first iteration is what you might want to call the Starboy iteration. What do I mean by that? Starboy meaning early youth ministry was very much about finding the right person to lead young people. So you needed to find a person, and that single person would become the be-all and end-all of youth ministry in your parish. They will get everything done. They would influence the young people. They would make all the things happen. Again, society changed, and in the 1990s to 2020, you really found a greater emphasis on star team, meaning we moved into this team understanding of youth ministry. So everybody was talking about, you must have a youth ministry planning team. You must have a youth ministry planning team. Must have a team, must have a team. Great, lovely, wonderful. And that team was made up of people who came together for the purpose of sharing the work of the ministry. And unlike in the 1960s and 1990s, you would have had, at that time, you may not have had a lot of lay people involved. You would have gotten a lot of nuns, priests, religious, being the people who led ministry. Definitely in Trinidad and Tobago, you saw a lot of that. In the first years of youth ministry, it was led predominantly by religious men and women. And then from the 1990s to 2020, it was more around how are we creating a team, a specialized team of people who will come together to get ministry done. In the post-COVID reality, and more so as, we were seeing it crop up more right before COVID, but COVID really brought it out. Youth ministry is less about the star team, but really about the entire parish owning up to its responsibility towards young people. And the way we're going to talk about structures and systems tonight, you're going to see that really come into play. Because all of us have a story of the way in which young people no longer come back to church, and it has nothing to do with how wonderful they feel or how lovely they think their youth minister or their catechist is. That era of the star person is gone, because the individual person is no longer bearing the type of weight in the life of a young person that them alone will be the reason why they stay committed to their faith. Great. So that's the journey we're going to take on tonight. So I just went through most of the models of youth ministry. Now, while these things were prevalent in a period of time, you may find that in your diocese, there are model ones, model twos, and possibly model threes happening. You may be able to go to a parish, and the parish have this one super duper person, auntie somebody, uncle somebody, and they do it all for young people. And that's very much the one youth leader kind of model. But then you may go to another parish and they have a team of people working, or they're trying to get a team of people working. That's very much model 2. Model 3 is now kind of emerging in some parishes in some parts of the Caribbean, but you could see it beyond the Caribbean as well. To understand model 3, you really have to have a different view of what is going on for the young person. So in this relationship, where you're looking at it as a relationship, God-centered, of course, but it's a relationship between the youth, their family, and their formators. So this relationship, youth and family, is the first relationship. But we come in to support this relationship. Now, notice I didn't put a singular person here. This person here, the formator, represents the catechist, the parish priest, the teacher, the youth minister. All of us are the formators, but all of us are just a single node in this trinity of a relationship, in which the family is also a major interest, a major player. Now, previously, we weren't talking that much about family because there were some assumptions we were making, that a Catholic young person is coming from a Catholic family with a certain level of Catholic formation within the family. That is no longer an assumption that we can make. And because of that, form now has to follow function, because the function of our ministry has changed. Even as we say that, we have to anchor all of this in a particular reality. We are dealing with young people. I'm going to say that one for the cheap seats in the back again. We are dealing with young people. Sometimes I think we forget that we lovingly, and if there's anybody under the age of 27, I'm sorry if I'm going to say this, the prefrontal cortex has not yet been fully developed, right? And so there are ways in which they literally are different from us. The way they think, their capacity for abstract thought, their engagement in the world is fundamentally different. And so if we're talking about youth, and the way from our office, so this may not be the universal definition, but it is the definition that we use in Trinidad, is that youth is adolescence and young adulthood. So you have early adolescence, you have older adolescence, which is that 15 to 18 kind of age group. But then you also have those very, very awkward years, which you call the years of transition. Because technically at 18, you are legally an adult. But we all know that they're still adolescents. They're really still in that kind of adolescence. So it's an awkward transitional state. Then you have from about 21 to about 25, early young adulthood, and then young adulthood in its fullest from 26 all the way to 35. I couldn't fit 35 on the page. Don't hold it against me. All right. Now, I know Matthew would have identified that, but I want to highlight that if we accept that somebody between the ages of 11 to, let's say, 18, 19, and then from about 20 to 35, they are physiologically in their brain different. It means that whatever we are planning, we have to bear in mind that their cognitive skills are different than many of our standing models of learning. Our standard models of learning in the church are basically adult-informed models of learning. So it is the difference, for those who are teachers in the room, between andragogy, which is adult learning, and pedagogy. Some of you all may be more familiar with pedagogy, but the nature of the church's teaching, actually around a lot of faith, is andragogous. It is around how adult formation can be built. So we always have to recognize that we need, in a real serious way, to redistribute and understand how a young person learns different than how an adult may learn, to be able to set up what we want to do in ministry. When we look at our timeline, therefore, we have to accept a major issue. Whatever came before us is going to affect the work that we do during this period, and the work we do during this period is going to affect the rest of this person's life. Can anybody, let me see if we can have a little fun for a quick minute. Can somebody tell me, remind me, or share with us a song from their teenage years? Name one song you remember from your teenage years. Anybody can tell me that?
I may show my age if I share a song from my teenage years.
We won't hold it against you. Don't worry.
Okay. A song that I really loved is Girls Just Wanna Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper.
Nice, nice, lovely. Anybody else? Your teenage years, what song you loved?
I think Miss Ricky just showed the age.
We listen, we listen, but we don't judge. Come on, right?
I can't get off this call.
Right. So, but somebody give me a song. What was a song that when you were like 16, you were singing it with your whole chest and just vibing off it? Give me a song.
I'm so afraid to say this, but Frankie.
Frankie.
Oh my gosh, I am so. No, I heard my big sister saying that. Yeah.
We listen, but we don't judge. I'm going in a direction when I say this. I need one more person. Give me a song in your teenage years that you were just singing hard. Anybody?
I don't think anybody would know this one. Top of the World.
Top of the World? No, I don't know that one. I don't know that one. I was going to say, I'd say a whole different song. But, so we have some examples. Thank you very much, Jillian. A song that I could sing, I know all the words too. You see Lauryn Hill's entire album. Don't even get me started with that. Why is Teresa even bringing this up? In your teenage years, the way your mind is operating, you are actually coding information a lot better than at any other time of your life. Yes, Valerie, the Fugees. Why are you afraid to bring it up? We were singing Wyclef Jean, yes. Unbending Knee, Four
Correct.
Seasons of Loneliness, Boys to Men.
All of them, all of them.
Thank you, Beres Hammond, right? Right, we wouldn't get any further down this road. But what I'm
No,
saying,
we would not.
I don't know why. Listen, everybody on this call is of a certain age, so let's go. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because the way you encode information in your teenage years is much stronger at any different point in time. It means that we have the capacity to make some of the greatest impact possible, because unlike childhood, where abstract thought is difficult and not possible, that's when they're beginning to understand love. everybody inside their head could talk about their first, the person who broke their heart, the love that they have in their teenage years. For some reason, even now, that could be brought to your mind in a way that maybe you can't even remember your 20s. All right? So particularly in adolescence, we have to be so much more refined and good at what we do in terms of ministry. That being said, another aspect of a young person's life that is a system related to church, so there are two systems related to church that we have to be mindful of, is the education system. Now, I know Suriname is here. Suriname has a slightly different educational cycle than the rest of the Caribbean. But in many ways, the cycle for the Caribbean is school starts in September, you go until December, you get a little Christmas break, you go January to about March when you get Easter break, and then you have your third term, which would be March, April, depending on when Easter is, and you end off early July. In the Caribbean as well, one of the things that we have is CSEC and CAVE. This is something that colors the life of Caribbean young people. And so understanding the stress that the educational system puts on a young person and how that encodes information into their life is very important. How many of you all have had sessions with young people and at exactly 11:30, they get fidgety? And when you look at, remember, it's because in school, that's the time they want to go to eat, right? That's the time they get in 11:30 to 12:30, or whatever the time might be in your country for lunch. This is the way cycles are encoded in who they are. And two, we as Catholic people, we are encoded with the liturgical cycle. So it's almost like, you know, our entire body knows how to live through Lent because we've grown up now so many years that for some of us, fasting during Lent almost feels like, okay, just part of life, right? We know many of us have no problem kneeling because why? We get so used to kneeling when most other Christian people will not kneel on a regular basis. There are ways in which cycles of doing certain things will impact us, and we have to bear that in mind as we plan and create systems in youth ministry. I see somebody put, yes, 10:30. What was that in the chat? Yes, 10:30 for work, that work break. When the munchies start, all right? Now, a best practice in Catholic ministry is what you call the pastoral planning cycle, right? So yes, we have the liturgical cycle, you have the educational system cycle, and I want to introduce you now to the pastoral planning cycle. This is not just for youth ministry, but this is in fact for all ministries. More often than not, because we have cycles, there are some things we do by rote. So in your parish, in your archdiocese, there's certain things that just happen automatically. It's Lent. By the time January hits, you already starting to think of, who gonna do the retreat? We need to organize for palms to burn, for ashes, right? But that's the liturgical aspect of who we are. But the pastoral aspect is a little bit difficult for us to get into. And the pastoral aspect is, what are the things that we do as the Catholic community that are not associated to the liturgy and the way we plan them? So that might be retreats, that may be sports days and harvests and so on. And the best practice in the church is the adoption of what is called the See Judge Act framework, which comes from Catholic social teaching, which has been adapted to be able to include celebration, evaluation, and instead of saying the word judge, we talk about discern. What does this look like? This looks like as we work with our young people, we are seeing what they're going through and listening to them. What is going on in their life? So all of us, I think, are pretty moved by what's going on with young people. We're seeing certain things, we're hearing certain things. And maybe from our point of view, we want to respond immediately, right? Immediately do it, boom. But what this is meant to teach us is that there's a point at which we have to pause and really discern what is the will of God for us, for our parish in this situation. This is a point in which we can be invoking God's grace and understanding so we can better understand what young people are going to. This is the point in which the needs become more real. So let me give you an example. You are noticing, for example, a lot of your girls maybe getting into a sexual relationship at the age of 16, right? A knee-jerk reaction might be to say, oh, these girls getting over-sexualized, and what we have to do, we have to give them theology of the body. Okay, maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. At what point did we sit and understand the situation better, one, and seek God's guidance on it? Yes, theology of the body is an excellent teaching, but at the same time, is there a deeper issue maybe around their own sexual health, their understanding of their body that they may need to go through? Is it deeper mentorship to understand how to be in relationships with the opposite sex? What exactly do we need to understand in this situation? So discernment is taking time to pause. Yes, we've noticed an issue. Yes, we want to respond to a need, but we now need to discern, how do we act? We go ahead and we act. We put in place a program and activity and exercise, and we take the time afterwards to evaluate it because, you know, everybody loves to have a postmortem. Everybody loves to sit down and talk about how things either went right or went wrong. But actually, it's a fundamental part of what we are meant to do as Christians, to take the time to prayerfully say, this is how we did well, this is how we didn't do well. And then the last thing which we don't like to do, or we like to do it too much, might be to celebrate it. And so the pastoral planning cycle gives us a way to engage how we are meant to do the work of the church. We see and we listen, we discern, and particularly now with synodality, the church is teaching us about spiritual conversation and the ways in which we need to not just listen to ourselves, but listen to all of the people of God, and particularly young people, about how do we move forward as church. Of course, we must act, we have to evaluate, and we have to celebrate. Notice there are two stickers there that say document, and we're going to come to that documentation part there. So this is where I want to ask some questions and hope that we could get some engagement. When it comes to two things that I mentioned to you all now, we have the liturgical cycle and we have the educational cycle, and we have the reality that young people live their lives in academic years, right? So from the time they're 5, they're living for whatever is the beginning of term in your country. In Trinidad, it's September. So everything is about getting in tune for September. But we also have a liturgical cycle. Our liturgical cycle officially starts November-ish, December-ish, depending on where Advent falls in a given year. In your country, if you were to think now of pastoral planning as a way of figuring out how do you plan, and when you plan or when you begin planning, what months of the year would you be considering? So I want to open just for anybody to comment, whether it is your parish or the level of the Archdiocese. What month of the year are you currently planning in? Or what month of the year do you think you should be planning in? And when I mean planning, I mean going back to this point of seeing and discernment. Anybody wants to attempt to answer?
Well, for the Archdiocese of Nassau, I'll talk about it on that level and then on my parish level. So on the Archdiocesan level, I follow the school model. So we kind of organize and prepare any events for the school year. So we're very conscious of when the kids have any midterm break, and like you said earlier, Easter break, Christmas break. So we kind of plan around that. And my planning starts about now. So I'm planning an event for October already. And so that's what I do on the Archdiocesan level. And then on the parish level, my parish team and I, we basically do the same thing. So whatever the Archdiocese is doing, we kind of then fit in what we want to do at the parish level with our young people. So that's how we plan it here.
All right.
I don't know if John Michael, he is also from the Archdiocese of Nassau, but he is in Grand Bahama on a different parish team. So, Mikey, I don't know if you want to share anything. I call him right out. He may be away from his phone, I guess.
No worries. And thanks for that, Julie. Anybody else wants to, based on what I've said about education system, pastoral planning, anybody has any thoughts or concerns they want to ask?
Well, I'll just add, also, Teresa, I do this more so on the Archdiocesan level. This pastoral planning as a cycle, I've never seen it like this, and this is so wonderful because I do this, but without actually naming it, I guess, because I do plan things months in advance. I do, I listen, when I listen to my parish leaders, because it's like their ears to the ground. So I listen to see what is it that your young people want from my office. How can we plan events that are fun but still catechesis and learning the faith? And so I do that months in advance, and then I go to I discern. I think, well, how can we? Is this a part of our mission that we want to do here at the Archdiocese? And then I go on to act when I start the planning and everything like that. And of course, evaluation, what worked, what didn't work, how can we improve next time, what can we keep for next time? And then of course, the celebration is when the event comes off wonderfully. Everyone had a great time. The kids are engaged, they had a great time, and they can't wait to continue on and do it again, or wait for the next great thing that we have in store for them. So really, thank you for this cycle. I've never even thought of it in this regard, but this is fantastic.
No problem, Julie. I think I would say from us in Trinidad, I would say we struggle with sufficiently getting feedback for evaluation at an archdiocesan level. I know many parishes are attempting to use the pastoral cycle, but when the information has to go all the way up for us to plan, there is always that lag in time. Because for us, in Port of Spain, we have to submit our plans in September, our archdiocesan plans in September for January. And so there is that, strangeness in terms of the plan. And then we also have to deal with campus ministry. And campus ministry requires a totally different, an academic year in a very structured sense. So there is that disparity that we try to bridge, but also by we also struggle, I would admit, getting sufficient people to provide us not just person-to-person feedback, because I could pretty much go to any parish leader and say, okay, what's going on? But there is something that happens when people come together and have that conversation together that I am yet to really get our diocese getting into the habit of doing. So yeah. I want to move on from here, but I want to make sure everybody understands this before I move on. Any final questions or comments? Not seeing anything in the chat. All right, we'll move on. So the big word, the big fussy word that nobody particularly likes, resource mobilization. We need money. We need money, we need people, we need things. We need things to be able to get things done. And I think it is everybody's in ministry's heartache to be able to get what we need to do what we want. And so the concept of resource mobilization is very important, because instead of using the language of finance or fundraising only, resource mobilization, and another word, stewardship, you're going to hear me use those two words more now, should help restructure your mindset to be able to say, you're not just looking for money, you're looking for resources. And sometimes we end up paying for things we shouldn't have to, because we did not put the type of relationships, which comes in terms with stewardship, in place. And so when we talk about mobilizing resources, we are talking about the formation of disciples. So how do we form people? How do we form leaders? Because before you can really be a leader, and we'll see that later down, you have to be a disciple. And how do we put in place structures of stewardship and fundraising? Right, okay. So I want to talk about the people side of resource mobilization. How many of us remember the day somebody asked us to get involved in ministry? Do you remember that day? You might have been just living your life, and some priest or some pushy, mature person in church was like, I think you will be so good working with young people. Or maybe you were brave enough to go and volunteer yourself. But either way, we all went through, or we should be going through, a process that refines our participation in the mission of the church. And so that moves from us being just a parishioner, just coming to church, just listening to the liturgy, participating in the mass, to being a newbie. Now, some of us may have skipped this step, but it is still an essential step. It is a place at which you have a person who is getting involved in the actions of ministry, but you are actively helping them to think through, is this for me? Should I be doing this? Then when this person has and can make a more full commitment, where this becomes their apostolate or their ministry of choice, you could call them a team member, and then they may or may not graduate to becoming a team leader. The story of most of us, however, is somebody saw us and made us a team leader one day. Let's just be honest. Somebody saw us, liked us, and say, hey, come and be a part of a team. And somewhere in that process, we had to discern, is this really for me? One of the greatest challenges in youth ministry often is that we tend to move our young people, when even their discipleship is not steady enough, straight into being a member of a team, without giving them the space to solidify their discipleship, and without giving them the tools to properly discern, is this something that I can commit to? But generally in ministry, you might have a parishioner, a newbie, or a volunteer, somebody who is far less committed to this cause. Then you have a team member, somebody who views this as something I'm committed to this. This is my call. I want to be here for this. And they make time in their life to do the ministry, and then a leader. It's really critical that we consider the difference between the lower part and the upper part, because Jonathan McReynolds has this beautiful song. I make words in it is, I make time for what I treasure. I make time for what I want. And it is the team member, somebody whose commitment is to the ministry, that we should be relying on. Not the newbies, not really, not the people who are new to the ministry. They are in a learning cycle. They are still getting to know what is going on. And so their capacity for commitment may not be what it ought to be. And we have to just accept that, right? But then somebody who is a leader is a person who takes on a greater level of responsibility. In between each of these points, formation is required. So formation is both an ongoing experience, but it is also an experience in which there ought to be a moment where people move from a newbie or to a team member. A really good example of that would be in the Catholic students movement. Within the movement, you have people who are just members of the movement. Then you have people who end up on different teams within, so they might be on the music team, the public relations team. But then you have people who decide they want to go up for election and they become members of the executive and they function at the level of leadership. All right. So when we understand that, this is why formation for leadership is not the same thing as formation for discipleship. What is required to form you as a disciple is one thing, but what is required to form you as a leader is something else. And so every diocese really has to have a sense of, how do we form leaders? How do we form people who we want to lead ministry? And maybe that formation feels more like apprenticeship, and there's nothing wrong with that. So maybe you have somebody who you're grooming them for leadership, and they are shadowing you with everything that what you do. They are participating in things, they're learning in a kind of an apprenticeship model. But then there are more formalized ways, like training that you have to do, like what we're doing now. And then even in more formal settings, there can be set moments of commissioning. So a commissioning moment is when, or an appointment moment is when a priest or the bishop says, you are going to commit, and you as of yourself or that person says, okay, I choose to be a leader in this moment. And even the process of commissioning is an act of formation. And so opening it up to the floor, what type of formation do you have in your diocese? Do you know? Or are you maybe the first being formed in ministry for youth ministry in your diocese? Anybody wants to share an answer to that question?
Good night, everyone. So for me, I'm definitely a first for my parish, but not for the diocese.
Thank you so much, Graziella. And we may find that for our diocese, this is a lot of firsts. Now, technically, this is not the first time the AEC has invested in a large-scale training. That actually happened in the 90s. So when very much we were talking about Youth Ministry 2.0, there was a large-scale training of leaders. And for many years, much of the good that came out of the region came out of large-scale training. So those of us who even know about AEC Youth Assembly, that was because there were people who were trained in the 90s who then recognized, based on their training, the need for a big event at the level of the AEC to be able to bring young people together. That's what training can do. And when you enter into it with your whole mind, body, and spirit, God inspires us to create lasting legacies. So the AEC Youth Assembly is a lasting legacy of a level of training that some people, some young adults and some religious received in the mid-90s, early 90s, that we are still, many of us are grateful for up till today.
In the Bahamas, sorry. Oh, so in the Archdiocese of Nassau, I do a lot of the training from the Archdiocesan level. However, with this upcoming training, the purpose is really for my team on Grand Bahama. As I said, that's a whole different island for their leadership team to get the training they need. So persons coming in, that they will then have the skills and tools to pass on training to them, because I'm the only one in my office. So I definitely want to ensure that they have what they need for anyone who's interested in ministry, that they know the steps to go through to do the training. So this is my attempt, my first step to ensure my other leaders and my leaders attending this the conference. I've been in ministry a while, so I was also intentional because they've already their season, they know about ministry. And so now they'll have the opportunity to really hone their skills so then they can then go back into their particular on their island to really continue and really start the training down there.
Nice. Thanks, Julie. All right. So we've gone to the place where we have a cycle that we want to commit to. We look at leadership training, but to get to the plan, there's some documents. Remember that cycle that I had before? There's some documents we need. We need plans, we need budgets, and we need reports. The bane of everybody's existence, a plan, a budget, and a report. But our plans, budgets, and reports should have some basic information in it. And we're not just doing this because we like work, obviously. We're doing it for the sake of documentation because I don't know how many of you all have ever been in this situation where there's something that needs to happen, but nobody knows where any of the documentation for it is. And there's no paperwork. It's the worst situation to be in. But as someone in ministry, it doesn't have to be a fancy corporate report. It just has to line up with a few basic things. So the goals and objectives. So just like you see, we talked about the goals in the beginning. So what are you planning to do? What is the goal of it? Is it to empower? Do you want to improve participation? Do you want to see growth? Basically. And then the objective is one level down for that, where you really write out the objective of what activity is. Great. Activity description. You should have some short narrative. We are going to take 50 young people to another parish to experience a movie night on a particular, so you're going to describe what it is. Outputs and outcomes. Now, this is always a ticklish one because sometimes we mix up the difference between an output and an outcome. When it is in a plan, it is an expected output or outcome. And when it's in a report, it is the output and the outcome. What is an output? An output is the tangible realization of whatever happened. So if you did a training session like this here tonight, the output tonight would be 18 minus 2, 16 people attending this session is the output tonight. We got 16 people attending. The outcome is the extent to which you have learned something from this session. Notice the difference between the two. More often than not, what we do in ministry is evaluate things by outputs and not outcomes. I'll give you an example. 50 young people go to a retreat. And we are so happy that 50 young people showed up. They eat food, drink things, The retreat was on Marian devotions. Great, lovely. We got facilitators. They came out. They had a wonderful time. Next week, do they actually know anything about Mary? Do they know anything about Marian devotions? If the answer is no, then we did not meet our outcomes, but we met our outputs. And one of the challenges that we are currently having in youth ministry is differentiating between the two. Because your outcomes directly relate back to your objectives. Your outputs are just a milestone along the way to your outcomes. I'm going to pause here for a moment, just because I know sometimes that gives a little bit of a trouble in terms of thinking through. Anybody has a question, or I can go ahead?
Just quickly, can you just go give the definition you did of output? I don't think I quite got that from you.
So an output is a tangible or measurable indicator of what would have occurred. Right? So confirmation, right? 50 people confirmed, 20 people confirmed. 50 or 20 people actually stood up and attended and participated, right? But confirmation in and of itself is meant to be an indicator, as we say, an outward sign of an inward grace. Great? If you come back the very next week and out of those bunch of young people, they don't know how to pray, they don't even come back to church, our outcomes are not what they should have been. Yeah? Any questions? Jadine, JL, Jessica, Crystal, Shannon, David, Trisha, Valerie, Nolene. Any questions so far?
I
Not
just
right
like,
now.
so I just like to share, Teresa, that we try to, especially in our retreats, we definitely have evaluations, and we have a challenge of following up with those evaluations, and really kind of putting the data together with that, and how do we follow through? And so that's been a challenge for us. And like you said, that the outputs are great, we get the numbers. However, when we come to that part of it, how do we then continue to ensure that they really take the lessons from the retreat and really implement them in their lives? So that for us, I know has been a big challenge, and I don't know. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if, like, I think we're gonna come to it, just the human resources. We talked about resources, and that's a big thing as well for us. We don't have enough persons to say, kind of sit down and really look at that, evaluate, and how do we now make action steps to move forward and make it, and ensure that we have the outcomes that we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And would you believe, more often than not, when we are struggling with outcomes, what we have to do is really reassess, is the activity that we planned meeting the need that we believe we have? So I'll give you, it's like the difference between catechesis and evangelization, right? You can call both of them faith formation, but evangelization is at the point of going towards conversion, like it's seeking conversion. But catechesis is for the converted. Now, if you are participating in conversion to somebody in catechesis for a young person who does not actually believe that God exists, this person is just literally learning facts. It's almost like an atheist doing a degree in theology. They can learn it, but it's not that they believe it, right? And so this also goes for one of the reasons why we also see a lot of young people not participating in church, right? Sometimes we say they're not participating in church and we blame them. But I know from a Trinidad context, we have two major problems. One, we have parental unwillingness to support ongoing formation, right? So we have young people, and we've seen a lot of it recently. Oh, they believe in God, but maybe they're in Form 4, maybe they're in Form 5, and their parents say that this is not the time for you to be going to church, you need to go to lessons. That is a very real thing. So you cannot then say that you need to change the program in that situation. The program's fine. The issue is not with the child, the issue is with the family system. And so differentiating sometimes when something is out of our hands and needs to be probably addressed in a different way, in a different context, is there. So the other one is a justice issue. And I don't know how many of y'all are very TikTok minded. I hope y'all are. I love me some TikTok. I find it very educational. It keeps me young. How many of y'all have been online and seeing a lot of people's responses to the new Pope, to our new Pope, Pope Leo? If you
I haven't
have
really,
it,
I've seen some responses, but I have not, I can't say I really delved into it.
so there are a lot of responses to him on TikTok. And a lot of the response, it started actually with Pope Francis's death. Many people are coming out saying, I am an atheist, but I liked Pope Francis. I am an atheist. I don't like the Catholic Church. Or I was a cradle Catholic, and they use the language of, I have deconstructed, and I don't consider, I'm no longer practicing, right? And then with the installation of Pope Leo, you have a lot of people saying, I may be a cradle Catholic, but I love where the church, his appointment, and they're very, what's the word I want to use? They're very protective almost of this idea of our new Pope being appointed. And in that, you are seeing this conversation around young people who are saying, a kind of fragmenting between people who are Catholic converts and people who are calling themselves cradle Catholics. And cradle Catholics are saying, I will always be a cradle Catholic, but the reason I left the church is because I did social justice teaching. A lot of our young people are leaving the church not because we did not form them well. Actually, we formed them very well. But we also formed them in social justice teaching. And from their perspective, we do not live up to our social justice teaching. No. No amount of programming is going to help that. What that requires is a church that recognizes that there are things that we may be doing wrong that we have to fix. That's not a program. That's actually where advocacy and community building comes into play. So this is the type of way that we have to be able to look at. Sometimes we may be creating programs and opportunities for young people, but they're not actually bringing us to the outcomes we want because they weren't pitched at the right objective or the right goal.
Would you say, Teresa, that is that where these settings would have to be changed now at this point?
So that's why they're considering these settings, but it's also looking at which settings are more important in this time period. Because what we're seeing is that we're doing a lot of work in the parish, but a lot more work has to be done at home, a lot more work has to be done in schools, a lot more work has to be done in the wider community, and a lot more work has to be done online. So here we are as youth ministers sorry, a mosquito distracted me there. We are youth ministers and we're trying to do everything in our parish, but we've limited our reality to the parish. And really what we need to be talking about, how are we, as Pope Francis said, outreaching? How are we in the spaces where young people inhabit? How are we going out to them? And so, yes, I agree with you. I agree with you insofar that we need to look at our priorities in the settings, as opposed to just saying everything revolves around at the point of them being on the parish compound. Yeah. I once heard another youth minister from the United States call it youth ministry in the wild. All right. Quickly want to identify a couple of things on this slide as well. Budgets, actual estimates and actuals. That's very important. Sometimes as a part of your discernment, identifying the challenges and the risks, being able to say, well, we want to do something in a parish or in an archdiocese, but there are certain people who might be some challenges or some risks, or the lack of money might be a challenge or a risk. And so we have to literally plan for the challenge or the risk. Very, very important. And of course, the evaluation information. So quick roadmap, and I'm so glad, I'm not going to call any names, that they're event planners in my midst. I'm going to do it in the most simple way possible. When we're planning, when we're budgeting, when we're doing what we do, sometimes we tend to focus on the day and not all of the things that need to be lined up pre and post as well. And this is where we want to bring in the social media. We want to bring in some of those other things. Are we planning for marketing? Are we planning for promotion? Are we planning for content creation? Are we planning for the phone calls that we have to make to parents and the meetings that we have to have? Sometimes because we only plan for what we think is the day and not the prep and not the post, we don't recognize the magnitude of what we are intending to do, and we don't resource ourselves properly. So whenever we're planning, one of the first things you should map out is, yes, we have a whole lot of stuff to do on the day, but what are the things we have to get done so that the day or the meeting or the whatever goes well, right? And then what are the things that we need to do in post so the next time we try something, that goes well. That's what post is about. Maybe it's ensuring that you have thank you cards or tokens, or that you give a report to your parish priest, or that you rent a venue to have a celebration, or make sure your Zoom is working to be able to have the postmortem. But all of that should be a part of your entire plan and your entire budget. Stewardship, this word that I love so very much. What is stewardship? And in the Bible, we have so many accounts of parables that Jesus gave us about stewards, right? That there's an entire teaching around Catholic stewardship, but we do not have time to get into that. Long and short of the story is, stewardship is all about harnessing the time, talent, and treasure of the people of God. Treasure, because we need dinero. We will always need some money. But where there isn't treasure, there is also the capacity to give talent. There's also the capacity to give time. And the more we start to value those who can also give time and talent, and recognize that it is weighted equally in God's eyes in relation to treasure, especially when we know how to harness both time and talent, you may find that if you're doing a budget, there are things that are going to drop in its cost, not because you have the money to pay for it, but you have developed the relationships where people are giving you time and talent, and that reduces the cost of what you have to do. And so from the perspective of being able to harness a resource, stewardship is an anchoring philosophy for how anybody who is leading in ministry needs to be able to operate. Now, stewardship also is not just what we get in and what we need to get, but you also have to think of your context as a stewardship context. You are the steward of this ministry. How are you being responsible for it? How are you building the capacity of your ministry as you take on whatever it is you're doing? And I once had somebody tell me, one of the best things you could ever do as a ministry leader is leave your ministry more capable of moving into the future than when you got it. If you are a good steward, remember, so you know that particular parable where God gives the talents, and and somebody says, well, no, the last one says, well, no, I know you're a jealous God. You don't like, things done badly. So I didn't do anything with mine, right? How are you looking at what this responsibility God gave you and trying to expand it, as opposed to just being worried that we will never have enough? Really important perspective to have. So some questions a good steward might ask when you have a clear plan. Is the budget realistic? I have somebody in my office always ask me, Teresa, you're being unrealistic with that plan. And I also have somebody in my office who's more than unrealistic than I am, because they want a plan even higher. I ain't calling no names, pointing no elbows. What type of fundraising do you need? Maybe if at the parish level you're thinking, okay, we have to raise funds. Sometimes we think the parish has to raise funds. Sometimes the young people need to learn how to raise their funds. And let us not underestimate the importance of helping young people learn how to raise funds. That actually is a character building exercise that we should not take away from them. So knowing that sometimes you have to make a cake because you know that you'll want to go on a trip because you're going to have a cake sale actually builds character as opposed to always assuming the parish will pay for all of it, right? What are the human resources that are needed? The difference between what is a donation and a sponsorship, and that's a critical one. A donation is just I hand over some money, but a sponsorship is different because it may have implications as to how the person wants to be treated and understood, especially if it's a business. Do they want to have anything of who they are registered in the documentation? And some of your countries may actually have tax or financial regulations that require some differentiation between donations and sponsorships. Another area would be stewardship in action. You purchase a computer or you purchase, somebody donated a projector. Who gonna install the projector? Who gonna keep it? Who gonna take care of it? If you got, equipment, how is it going to be maintained? And then, are you purchasing things that can be reused or recycled, or are you using rentals as a part of it? And sometimes having a location, a venue that can be rented or as opposed to being purchased is better than owning. And you have to think about that as also being a good steward, because not every time must a steward own to be able to use. Food for thought. Four things we need to know about stewardship and documentation. You must have the plan, right? But you're not just planning by yourself. You're not sitting in a room and coming up with an idea by yourself. You have to allow the planning process to see the light of day and the Holy Spirit inside of other people. Okay? So planning with the community, not just for the community, is a critical step. 2, you can't have the plan and hide it under a bushel. You must actually also communicate the plan. Notice I didn't say communicate the event. Communicating the event is letting people know an event is happening. Communicating the plan is saying, we want to minister to young people in this way, and we've chosen to do it through an event. Those are 2 different things. And knowing who needs to be informed in a particular way, having this information available to parents becomes critical in this step. Maintaining all forms of records. If you're not holding on to your receipts and your documentation, you will get in trouble. We should know this by now. And then once you have a plan, you will find it very, you won't believe how many people are willing to support you once you have a plan, or a plan in which they see themselves participating in, even if it's in the smallest way. Don't feel that you shouldn't tell the old ladies in the church that you have a plan for youth ministry, because they're going to sit down and cover you in prayer in a way you will never know you needed to be covered in prayer. From the lowest to the greatest, communicating what you do will give you not just support, but also feedback. And that is critically important. And when you'll get this presentation, we could go through this a little bit. You could go through this a little bit more. But if you're doing a budget, there are some basic, what you call line items that you're going to have. You should have income, you should have expenditure, and your income should have things like a subvention or an allocation, which might be the money the parish gives you or the diocese gives you to do whatever you want to do. But you also need to look at how are you fundraising, donations, maybe even collections. Some of you all have very nice countries in which you are allowed to have special masses to get collections. That's something you may want to ask your bishop. Don't say Teresa, say it, right? Sponsorships, and then program revenue. If somebody is paying to participate in a program, that is also a form of income. Obviously, expenditure, only thing we had to spend money on, but never forget that catering is important and that tokens are important. I added this slide just to say this. There is a way in which what I am providing to you is a lot of formal information. But it's not that there isn't a less formal way of doing things. I was a parish youth minister for 7 years, and my parish priest never wanted a written document. He wasn't going to read it. But every 2 weeks, I sat with him after Mass and basically told him everything that was on that document. So although that document became my document that I then passed on to people after me, my priest didn't really want it. And so we have to also understand that there may be people that what I'm sharing with you is good and it's professional and you should be done, but not everybody's going to take to it in the same way as some other people. And so we have to bear that in mind, that unofficial reporting is also very valid, very necessary, and it also can build relationship in a way that many other things can't. This is a lesser point, but still a good point. What we call the goal to evaluation pipeline and the evaluation to goal pipeline. We always have to remember that when we sit to evaluate what we do, we're evaluating not on the outputs, we're evaluating on the goal. Did we empower? Are we bringing about further participation? Are we seeing growth? If we're not seeing those things, then the goals haven't really been accomplished. Now, you might see you might see a tiny bit of growth. You might see a tiny bit more participation. It may not be a lot, but it's still the goal. If you're not seeing it, then that's the kind of conversation you need to have at the point of evaluation. All right? Quick pause. Any questions before I move on? I know I'm going through this very fast, but forgive me and my Trinidadian accent. Let's go. So we've been through the systems. Structures, remember we said form follows function. So what are the forms that we're talking about to achieve a lot of what we said before? I want to remind us that I'm going to be talking from Youth Ministry 3.0 perspective. So I'm not going to be talking I'm going to reflect on Youth Ministry 2.0, which is the team approach, the Youth Ministry planning team, but I'm also going to be connecting it back to the parish approach, which is Youth Ministry 3.0. Now, I am going to say this, it is important that it needs to be said. The priest is the apostolic leader of our community in a parish. Our archbishop is the leader of our community. Our vicars, our regional vicars, are the heads of our deaneries or vicariates. And it is from them we take our charge, our understanding. Now, as baptized people, we are called to participate in the mission of the church. But it is critical for us to understand that the role of the parish priest cannot be diminished or circumvented. So I know many of us have many conversations we could have about the role our priests play. Sometimes wonderful, sometimes not so wonderful, but it does not change who we are as Catholic Church. And I can do all the quotes for canon law. I believe it is canon law 1460 all the way to like 540, all of the canon laws related to the people of God and the way the church is structured, the role of the pastor, the role of the pastoral council as well. That's something that we need to know, that canonically, the pastoral council has a role to play in what happens in a parish. And so while we may be a youth ministry planning team, really what we ought to be doing is working with our pastoral councils to bring youth ministry to life. And it is critically important to do that because in many ways, when we create a team that does not talk or relate to the pastoral council, it's much harder to get everything done. It is much, much harder to get everything done. And there may be people on the pastoral council that we need to evangelize, that we need to form so that they recognize young people are not, as people keep saying that, young people future church, or as a part of, they are integrated into the life of the church. So it is our job as leaders to work with pastoral councils, to work with our priests, to help them see what we have been formed already into knowing. So in terms of the context, and I'm going to do a lot more pictures just to end off tonight, of Youth Ministry 2.0 and the roles of our parish, we have different structures that have become popular, especially in the AAC, as part of our youth ministry structures. So we have youth group executives, and a youth group executive is when we allow young people to self-organize to run any kind of youth group. You have youth group moderators and team leads. So that's when you have an adult who is helping to lead a youth group. But you have altar server coordinators. Now, this is very contentious. But in the Caribbean, altar serving is predominantly done by young people. Now, wherever you have young people in need of formation, even though it is a liturgical ministry, the skill sets required to lead them are the skill sets found in youth ministry. So if altar servers had more adults like the way it is in Europe, it would be one thing. But many of the times we have problems with altar servers is because we have an adult who is not sensitive to knowing how to lead young people. And so they too are a part of who needs to understand and learn youth ministry. Then we have certain other types of youth groups. You have Junior Legion of Mary, Junior SVP. They are also types of youth groups. Why? Because they are young people leading other young people doing a thing that the church desires. Now, many people find that hard to believe because Legion of Mary is different. Junior SVP is different. But again, what is young people? When you think of Junior SVP, it's young people responding to their talent or their desire to serve. That's a form of participation. Legion of Mary, same thing. Altar servers, same thing. So when young people are the predominant people taking over a ministry, then you have to start to see it from a youth ministry lens. Not because it's a coalescing, so it's not that it's something only in youth ministry, but you have to look at it through a different lens because you are in fact ministering to and with young people in those spaces. Of course, confirmation is there. Then another structure within a parish would be a youth ministry planning team. Now, there are many different versions of a youth ministry planning team. Notice a youth ministry planning team is not the same thing as a youth group executive. A youth group executive is chairperson, vice chairperson, secretary, treasurer, and so on. A youth ministry planning team could look like the head of confirmation, the head of altar servers, the head of the youth group coming together to plan so that they could take this information back to the pastoral council. Or it could be just a group of people that have been brought together who then work with those ministries to plan what happens for a parish. In any given parish, more than likely the spiritual director is the parish priest or an assistant parish priest or somebody assigned who is at the level of pastoring capacity that a parish priest is assigned, and they work with young people. And then, of course, you have that lovely position that some of us get thrown into, parish youth ministry coordinator. Now, the parish youth ministry coordinator takes responsibility for creating relationship across all of these structures, right? So now we get into some pictures. I just want to show you some stuff from Trinidad. So this top picture is the youth executive from one of our parishes. But then in contrast, you have the sports team of the parish of Shogunas. Both of these are structures in the sense that they engage young people differently. At the level of the youth executive, these are young people leading other young people. But the sports team, you have adults, and the adults are mixed into the group. You may not notice them. So that's one sports, that's one captain there, that's one captain there, that's one captain there. And they are leading young people. So they are adults leading young people. And we call that the difference between youth-led versus youth-serving, right? Now, that's in Youth Ministry 2.0. But as we've gotten into Youth Ministry 3.0, as I mentioned, we are talking about, you know, a more diverse network of people serving young people and being exposed to young people at different levels. And so I love this analogy. I love using this analogy, and I hope it helps you. Think of what we do with young people as an arrow that pierces their heart. Now, many of y'all may not know the parts of an arrow. I will help you with some of them. So you have the arrowhead up at the top here, so, right? Then you have the shaft, which is the long sticky piece. Then you have what you call the fletching, which would be long time it would be feathers, but now it's plastic. And then you have what is at the end here, so called the knock, right? So it's most people know and understand the parts of an arrow. Obviously, this is the part that pierces. This is the part that goes through and sticks whatever it is. And then the fletching helps with cutting through the air and building speed, but the knock helps with guidance. See where I'm going here with this now? Parents pierce. Parents are the first point that gets into the heart of a young person. It is however parents have pierced the heart of their young person or not pierced the heart of their young person, that will tell us the amount of work we have to do. Because imagine, we now as a parish, we are only shaft, fletching, and knock. We're going to have a hard time. It has nothing pointy to get in, right? So where you have parents not doing their formation work, there is nothing to get into the heart as good as we would like. Not saying that we can't, but it's a more difficult road. The formators, so the direct formators are, let's call them, they're still on the arrowhead, right? But they're this part here. So the widest part of the arrowhead is the part that really opens up the wound, for want of a better word. The community is the shaft. So the community is the one that, you know, when an arrow goes into something, the arrowhead goes out the next side, but it's the shaft that stays in, right? So it's the community that keeps us in the heart of the young people. Ask any young person as to why they stayed on in church. They will tell you yes about a retreat they did and they did call, but it's really the community that sustains them. Now, the two underestimated parts of the arrow, the fletching and the knock. It is our priests who provide us that kind of guidance. The knock is the point. If you've ever done archery, an archer, when they string the bow, they hold onto the knock, onto the bow, and that's what helps with direction, right? And the fletching is for the guidance system during the air. So you need, let me say this categorically, at every level, a team of people, parents, old people, it don't matter, praying for you, your team, and your young people. That is not negotiable, folks. And if you don't have one, may I strongly suggest that as of tonight, you figure out how to get one. Intercessory prayer is how we cover ourselves from the spiritual warfare that happens when we are in ministry, because we know that it happens. And so ensuring that there is prayer that covers your ministry is essential. And of course, the knock is the priest, and the priest is the one who is setting us up to guide us well into ministry, because it is the priest who is also guiding the parents and guiding the community and guiding the formators. And that's why they are the guidance system. Yes, sometimes our knocks are off. Yes, sometimes we don't have our fletching is not there. Yes, sometimes our shaft is a little bit wobbly, but think of the arrow analogy as the way you want to be able to set up for your ministry to get things going, and to sustain and to have a structure in mind. All right. So some of the 3.0, taking that arrow analogy, some of the actual structures in your parish might be the pastoral council, the parish liturgical coordinator. So who helps or organizes the mass? Right? Who is it when you have to do a youth mass? Who are the people you have to talk with? The sacristan, the who? Who is that? Right? Parish groups with youth in it. So you might have music ministry with a lot of young people, or hospitality ministry with a lot of young people, wherever. And then you have community sports clubs and groups like Scouts. All of these too now become other structures within your parish that are a part of how you are planning and organizing ministry. So here, I'm just sharing some pictures again of budding 3.0 ministry in some of our parishes. And here we have two pictures from two different parishes in which they're parish priests. So this is Father David Khan. He's also the southern vicar, so the vicar of the southern part of Trinidad, sitting with a diverse group of people, including parents, youth, some of their coordinators, as they were planning together. And then you also here, you have Father Michael Woodruff and Father Jonathan Steele. These are Carmelite friars, and they are planning, they were doing a little exercise about building a house for their young people, building a home for their young people. And you have this gentleman here in green. He's the head of the men's ministry as well as the head of the prayer ministry in his parish. And he was there because he was there as his prayer support team, and catechist, a parent, the head altar server, another parent, and actually a medical doctor, because they were talking about some of the issues around medical intervention for young people in their parish. Another way that might be helpful, this is just last week. Two of these people are from the Santa Cruz parish. 1, 2, 3, they are part of the parish ministry planning team. And this is a parish, what do they call it? A cottage meeting. You see Father Hazley there in the background. And this was a moment when they were teaching the pastoral council and other parishioners about the vision they wanted to share with this ministry, that it wasn't just about having events, but having a change in the way the community looks at young people. We could basically stop there, but I just want to quickly run through some archdiocesan structures, because remember, it's supposed to go from parish all the way up. I don't have any pictures of any of the vicariate activities or the vicariate teams, but in the Archdiocese of Port of Spain, we have what is called the Catholic Youth Commission, and actually the AAC document lays out the parameters as to what a Archdiocesan Youth Commission is. And this is one of their meetings. It's called a stakeholder meeting, where everybody gets together and talk about an issue. This was last year when we were talking about vocations. This is another archdiocesan structure here. So you might see this guy, he's a guy from Chaguanas, but there's some other people here. These are the sports ministry leaders of some of them in our diocese. They get together on an irregular basis to talk about how they are using sport as a form of ministry, because we have sports ministry, and we have two things, what we call prayer and practice, and then we have something called Shepherd's Cup. This is what is called a youth advisory group. So this is a structure in particular that a bishop might want to pull together, where he gets to talk directly to young people and listens to them. So this was an event at the end of the year where some young people sat down with His Grace and told them what's going on. They like this, they don't like that. It's an opportunity for advocacy from the mouths of young people themselves. And yeah, just some time to say what they want and how they feel about life in the diocese. And then a different type of group is when different ministries come together. So this was Eucharistic adoration across some diocesan ministries, and these representing core, choice, 424, the catechetical office, Alpha, Laudato Si, Holy Spirit chosen. All of those are archdiocesan ministries that came together for some listening and discernment. So those are just some pictures of what's happening in Trinidad, but I'm sure y'all may have pictures of your own. And so that's really the end of, oh, right. And the last structure is an office. And this has been a goal of many of the islands in the region, which would be to have people who are full-time coordinators. So this is these are the members of the youth office in Trinidad. So you have me, you have a program coordinator and admin, and we also have responsibility for campus ministry. So you see there again, Father Mikel Woodruff and then Father Lindsay. They are attached to our campus, our UWI campus. One of our volunteers, like our lead volunteer, Matthew, who was outreach, she did the session last time, and Silma, she's also associated to campus. So those are some of the types of structures that can operate at the archdiocesan level. Oh, and I forgot, I have one more. Structures, so last, I promise this is the last one. Go back to what I said at the beginning, form versus function. Form must serve function. So the structure must serve. Structures must cater for the formation of the leaders, of whoever it is there. It must also cater for fellowship. And this is something that maybe some of the diocesan leaders could speak to. Part of the reason that we struggle with leadership at the parish level seems to be because we are not creating enough spaces for fellowship across parish leaders. Because people feel isolated, they feel like they're struggling in their parish, them and themselves, and we don't create spaces, or we may not be creating spaces where there's enough talk across parishes to build camaraderie and to beat the isolation of ministry. Structures must also hold people accountable. It's not good enough just to, say, okay, you tried. We also have to tell people when they do the wrong thing. And that's important. Structures are meant to support succession planning. Who's going to replace us and other people? Julie was talking about, expanding her team. And everybody, y'all are part of a succession plan right now, actually. And last but not least, structures must have the voice of young people participating in them, because it's their ministry in the first case, and if we're not talking to them, we're on dotishness. And I promise, thank you, that is the last slide.